and cast. Good. How about the snake roll? Did you want to talk about that right now?
The snake roll is just a variation for people to do in just a single move, and it replaces basically the double spey on the opposite side of the river. Just as I was doing a double spey here and casting straight at you folks. The same thing is here, except our initial move is back toward the bank if I'm on the other side of the river. I come forward, I pull fast, that sets my anchor point right here. Again, the rod's length distance off of my casting shoulder, and as soon as it touches, we're going ahead with our forward cast.
Can you try to demo that on the left hand so we can see
Sure.
how it works going ahead?
Yep. As long as I don't get out there.
You got it.
Somebody needed dental floss, I heard, in the back here. Can you help them out?
Yeah.
All right.
No hooks, I like that.
So let's do a spiral with the
Here,
left.
I've got an idea. I can do it this way too. This way I'm actually casting downriver. You come back toward the bank, forward, pull. As soon as that touches, your anchor is touching, you're going. It's called touch and go casting, splash and go casting.
Yeah, you'll hear the common term splash and go, touch and go. It's referring to the tip of the line anchoring the water and just hooking on, grabbing it, gives you that tension to form the D-loop and bend the rod against the resistance of that anchor. So that's the snake roll. Did I hear a fish rock? Oh, that was a rock. I heard a splash anyway.
There was one other cast that I'll show you. It's useless, but it's kind of cute. A couple of buddies of mine were out, actually up on the Cowlitz one day, and they were actually having a drink. River was blown chocolate colored. They were drinking wild turkey, and they were trying to throw cast, come up with something new. So they came up with this cast that goes around behind your back, comes back forward here, and fires out at the target. It's pretty much useless unless you've got a wind that's blowing straight at you and you don't want to hit yourself.
Or unless you're drinking wild turkey.
Or if you're drinking wild turkey.
Yeah. Okay. Once again, this is the traditional category of casting. Long lines, long rods, fixed line casting. And the benefit is that you're not retrieving after every single cast. You lay it out there, it swings around, pick it up and go. It's very efficient. There's no time spent, generally speaking, retrieving and reconfiguring your line. Along about the 1960s, anglers and tournament casters in Scandinavian countries figured out, hey, why don't we try using a shooting head in combination with spey casting? And it was figured out that you can use a much lighter, shorter rod. Common today is rods in about 12 to 14 foot range, probably picking 13 foot as your number one length for the Scandinavian style of spey casting. The big difference here is the line is a shooting head backed up by monofilament, and on every single cast you can see the transition from the orange to this light color yellow stuff, which is mono, probably 35-pound test or so. And this line is probably 2.5 to 3 times the length of the rod. That's all, no more than that. Any more than that, it gets cumbersome to form the D-loop, and it would work if you can handle it, but it fishes beautifully with 2.5 rod lengths, and then there's often a fairly long leader, and this is typical of a floating line scenario. Anglers fishing for Atlantic salmon historically use floating lines and a fly near the surface or a dry fly on the surface. But the style of the cast is not so different than the traditional. There's a pick, a turn, an anchor, a splash, and a go. But it's just done with a much more abbreviated casting motion. With the big rod, there was a lot of arm motion, a lot of body motion, and a long casting stroke. With this style of cast, it's all much the same, but more compact. Your two hands stay in front of your body more, and it's just using the bottom hand a lot, and the top hand as a pivot point. Just go ahead and let out a cast for us, just 2 or 3 little short casts here, and demo out a Scandi cast for us, Steve.
One of the other big advantages to these two was for Atlantic salmon, if you've got a lot of cover here, like we've got people here, with our traditional style of casting, we're throwing a D-loop that's way back up here on the bank. One of the cool things about this is that you're just throwing very minimal back cast. You have very minimal back cast requirements, and you can just shoot a lot. You can shoot a line a long ways. lift, again, pivot, and let her fly.
So there's a
Very
lot of
simple.
commonality in the style of the cast and how do you do the cast between traditional and the Scandi style. The big difference is the line, and then at each cast you will shoot it out there to reach your distance. And then at the end of the dangle here, at the end of the swing around and you're done, you got to retrieve it back in.
And that was one of the other big advantages to this style of shooting head for Atlantic salmon. That if you've ever been on the Kola Peninsula in Russia or any place that you've actually had the chance to throw for Atlantic salmon, they love a stripped fly. When you're working, especially when the water gets warm, you can use little tiny flies and strip them, and they take it. They're very aggressive to a strip fly. That's not the case typically for steelhead. Occasionally, if you get a really fresh steelhead, you'll have one chase it. But typically, not so much. That's why we just have a nice smooth swing. And on really big rivers, the traditional style is very nice because you just lift or throw. With this, you have to strip it in to a common place each time you cast. And all of the casts that Steve just described and we just presented with the traditional, we can do the same thing with
The spiral pickup that you just demoed, that was a good little cast. Show us that with a spiral pickup. Rather than the traditional, just pick it up and then anchor it. You can spiral it and then change your direction, anchor and cast. Yeah. Also on these rod, the rod action for Scandi is often a little bit faster taper to help make a tight, narrow loop. Whereas with the traditional, it was more of a moderate powerhouse rod, big line, a little bit wider casting loop. Rod actions tuned towards the Scandi style are a little faster taper, and the line feels lighter to the rod. With traditional, it was common that the middle of the rod is really bending a lot. With the Scandi style, it's more of a dry fly trout cast where you're making a nice tight loop from the tip of the rod. And the sensation of this is not to bend the bottom and hurl the tip. It's more of casting it off the tip, trying to make a tight little narrow loop from the tip of the rod, beautiful narrow loop like that. That's what carries the cast, is the shaping of the loop, and you're not belting it out with a lot of muscle from the bottom end of the rod. So figure it like off the tip, not a turning it over kind of a feel. So this is the Scandi cast. Mostly it's done with floating lines, but there are a lot of anglers using intermediates, and the intermediate may sink a foot or two down. It slows the drift. As you all may know, that the surface water scoots along real fast. If you break the surface tension and go down 6 inches or so, the water speed may often be a little bit slower. And the slower the swing around that you can achieve is generally desirable in most forms of salmon and steelhead fishing. So some people like to use this with an intermediate line as well. More anglers are learning about this line for local rivers, our Deschutes, and some of the John Days and places where a surface fly is effective. We're going to trade outfits to the third most common and probably the most used in the Northwest is what we call the Skagit style of casting, developed on the Skagit River in the 1980s. It employs a shooting head similar to the Scandinavian line, has a relatively short piece of fly line backed up with monofilament, or some people prefer thin fly line. So we have, here's about 35 pound test monofilament, a short piece of floating line, probably around 20 feet in this case, 24 feet maybe, and approximately 10 to 12 feet of fast sinking tip. The total length from the end of the sinking tip, not counting leader, but from the end of the sink tip up to the shooting head where the mono is again about 2.5 and not over 3 times your rod length. So if you got a 12 foot or a 14 foot, it would be nice to change the lengths of the line to achieve that 2.5 to up to 3 times the rod length. So the casting method here was a little tricky because we got this sinking tip. It's not so easy to just lift it up and splash and go, especially with heavily weighted flies. And the anglers on the Skagit River developed a cast that employs what we call the snap T or circle C to reposition the tip of the line in the upstream, a rod's distance away, and then use the belly of the line to load up the floating part will be doing the load of the rod. So the thing is, this is called a sustained anchor cast versus the touch and go anchor cast. Traditional and Scandi uses a touch and go anchor. This can be a sustained anchor where you allow the tip to settle in for a moment, and then it's a possibility to reposition the sink tip, because when you jump this thing upriver, it may not always land in the perfect place. You can now do certain little maneuvers off to the side. These are little maneuvers called the Perry poke, and you can reposition where is that sinking tip, how deep is it, how shallow is it. So, but the very first part of this cast is the dangle. It's downstream. Sometimes a very heavy